Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is the first video in a new series called Drinking with Dave. And the idea behind this series is that every episode I'll take a different drink and I'll describe it, but then I'll also pair it with classical music by choosing some symphony or aria or something that I feel complements or embodies the essence of this drink in some way. I am by no means a whiskey expert. In fact, my only credential in either category was as station manager of a classical radio station. And I guess I wasn't a music major during my undergrad. But I am by no means a whiskey expert. I am just a whiskey enthusiast that's talking to anyone up for a drink. And I want this channel to be very accessible to people that want to learn about classical music, want to learn about different alcohols, and along the way we'll learn together. So why pair drinks with music? Why not just try a drink, describe it, and leave it at that? And the answer goes back to one of the things that I love most about music. And that is it opens up an entire world of communication that allows individuals to express ideas, thoughts, and emotions that really couldn't be expressed any other way due to the limits of our own vocabulary. So with that said, let's jump right in. Now this one is familiar territory for me, and that is the Port Charlotte 10-year. So the Port Charlotte is 40 ppm. It's a very peaty Scotch. Not as much as some others, but it's up there. It's 50% ABV, so very respectable ABV. It's also non-chill filtered. It's non-colored, both of which are positives. And it's been aged 10 years. Now, as for the aging process, the majority comes from American oak casks, which is pretty standard for Scotch. But 25% actually comes from French wine casks, which is very interesting. It's not something you see very often in an entry-level Islay expression. Now, I might actually compare this to the Laphroaig 10. And the reason I'll make those comparisons and contrasts is because Laphroaig has sort of been my go-to Scotch here at the house, but is slowly being replaced by the Port Charlotte. Now, as I said earlier, this actually comes from the Bruichladdich distillery, which has a very interesting history. The distillery goes back to 1881, but at one point in time had shut down for a long time. I can't remember when it shut down, I think the 60s, something like that. But in 2001, there was this effort to bring this distillery back to its former glory. And Jim McEwen, who was the GM over at Bowmore, left Bowmore and was part of this revitalization effort. And in 2001, Bruichladdich relaunched, started distilling again, started making some of the original whiskeys, but then also started adding completely new things to the conversation as well. And since then has done quite well. I think they've won Distillery of the Year something like a dozen times in the last 2 decades. So very respectable distillery. And with that said, let's jump in and see what's on the nose. So right off the bat, you get smoke, you get peat, but you also get a lot of salt. Of course, in Islay, the soil is full of salt because it's right there on the Atlantic Ocean. So it's a briny type of smoke. You get a full waft of sea air. It's dense, but it's also nuanced. There's an elegance behind the smoke that you don't get with something like a Laphroaig or an Ardbeg. And then behind that smoke, you get some citrus tones coming in. Probably more lemon than anything else. Yeah, definitely picking up a lot of lemon, but maybe a little bit of honey. There's some sweetness there too. Maybe even maple sausage, although that, it's probably coming in with the smoke as well. But I would definitely say your most predominant profiles there on the nose are going to be the smoke, the lemon, and the salt, which is, pretty typical for an Islay. Let's have a taste. It's fantastic. So obviously what jumps out right away is the smoke and the peat. I would say compared to the Laphroaig is a little peatier on the front end, whereas the Port Charlotte is a little smokier on the back end. Now obviously those two profiles go hand in hand. Peatier Scotch is also going to be a little bit smokier, but they are very distinctive flavor profiles. But it's what comes behind that smoke that's the real payoff. I'm picking up some honeydew, lemon, vanilla, some blackberries, brine. There's some malt in there, honey. There's a very earthy flavor as well. I would say soil, maybe soot. On the tail end, just a hint of menthol. It has a very long finish, but the flavor that really stands out to me on the finish that you don't really pick up on the nose, at least I don't, is the vanilla. The vanilla mixes with the smoke in a way that reminds me of a pipe tobacco called Captain's Choice, or Captain's Black, I think it might be called. But that pipe tobacco-like finish is one of the things that really drew me to the Port Charlotte. The French wine casks as well bring a very interesting complexity, and it's that uniqueness, that complexity, that diversity of flavors that I think make the Port Charlotte really stand out from the rest of the pack. So if I'm pairing this with music, I'm gonna go with Grieg in the Hall of the Mountain King. And I'll leave a link down in the description below in case you want to listen to that while you sip. I did think about, maybe I could play the music behind these videos, but YouTube can be a little funny about copyrights, and I don't want the video to get flagged. I mean, in theory, most classical music should be in the public domain, but there are actually two copyrights. There's the composition, but then there's also the performance as well. So just to play it safe, I'll be leaving the link down in the description below. So anyway, Grieg is easily the most prominent of all Norwegian composers, and the composition he's most well known for is incidental music for a play called Peer Gynt. Now, the story of Peer Gynt goes all the way back in Norwegian folklore and was later made into this play. And in fact, if you listen to the whole piece, you'll hear several things that you'll recognize, particularly morning mood. But in fact, what I'll do is I'll actually leave two links in the description. I'm going to leave one link for In the Hall of the Mountain King, and then I'll leave a second link to Peer Gynt Suites 1 and 2. And In the Hall of the Mountain King comes late in that first suite and is the part in the story where Peer is trying to escape the Hall of the Mountain King where he's in prison. And, kind of starts slowly as he's sneaking. Then he's discovered by the trolls. They start chasing him. And you can hear that in the music as they're getting closer and closer and bearing down on him. The reason I love it for this particular whiskey is that it starts subtle. You have bolder tones, right off the bat. The bassoons and the lower strings provide a deeper texture that really complements the smokiness that you get right off the bat. But the flavors haven't reached their peak yet. Hasn't reached their full potential. It develops, it grows. You pick up more on the finish, and then you pick up even more on the second sip. It gradually builds just like the music. And when I'm sipping, I like to go through stages. I like to let it settle on the tongue. So what I'll do is I'll kind of start at the front of the tongue near the hard palate, kind of pick up those notes, roll it to the mid part of the tongue and the soft palate, pick up some of those notes. And then what I'll do is I'll kind of create some space, you know, almost like I'm yawning, but with my mouth shut, obviously. And what I find is when I do that, I pick up completely different notes during each stage, but that's particularly true of the Port Charlotte. Once I roll that dram of Port Charlotte to the back of my mouth and I really start creating some of that space, that's when I get that explosion of flavor. And all those other notes really start kicking in. And that's the moment to me in the music, about a minute 35 in, when the intensity really comes in and really kicks it up a notch. And you know, I pick up something different each time. I had a bottle once where I swear I could taste peaches, and I haven't been able to pick that up on any bottle since. But it definitely has a complexity that you don't get in a typical Scotch, and that's one of the things that I love most about it, or I should say your average Scotch, you know. But anyway, if you're a fan of Islay whiskeys, I highly recommend the Port Charlotte. I think it is a must-have. So anyway, that's all I have for this episode. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for future episodes. Thanks.